Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September 16th regular board meeting. This is our first board meeting of the school year, so we hope that everybody has had a great start to the school year. What we normally do in education meetings is we have a time for public comment on agenda items only at this time, and we do not have time for comment at the end of the meeting. But because we think there's going to be a lot of interest at this time, we're going to add a period of time for comment at the end of the meeting. And so there will be that opportunity. So if you would like to wait until the end of the meeting, that opportunity will be there. But I'm going to ask now if there's anybody who would like to speak to an agenda item only, please come and sign up with Ms. LaPera. Okay, so we'll open it up. Is somebody coming up now? Can't tell. No, okay. So I'm going to move on to new business of the Board of School Directors. So is Mr. Holland here? He is here. I'm glad to see you, sir. So as many of you might know, because either you attended or you read about it in the papers, this past Thursday, September 12th, we had a wonderful series of events to honor the occasion of the moment of integration in the Lower Merion School District 50 years ago. 50 years ago, that's 1963, there was a lot going on. There was a church in Birmingham that was bombed. We've heard about that recently. There was an Alabama governor who declared his support for segregation forever. And Dr. King led the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, which we've heard a lot about recently. And we in this community had our own local struggle for civil rights that places us right at the center of our nation's history. The events last Thursday included a dedication of a historical marker at the site of the Ardmore Avenue School, a symbolic walk to Lower Merion High School, and a formal ceremony that included alumni from the class of 1970, current students, General Julius Becton, class of 1944, and additionally, current students presented a mural commemorating the moment of integration. There were 2 different student documentaries. Students gave musical performances and dramatic readings. So on behalf of the Board of Directors and Dr. McGinley, I want to thank the many people who worked to make September 12th such a spectacular day, but also who have worked to incorporate this moment in our history in our curriculum throughout the year, which is very exciting. And this includes students and teachers, staff and administrators, alumni, and community members. From the school district administration, we'd like to thank Wagner Marseille, Chris Hall, Barbara Giorgio, Doug Young, Sean Hughes, and Scott Eveslag, as well as many teachers. We would like to thank especially the class of 1970 for their vision, passion, and commitment, in particular, Wendell Holland, Michael Antonopoulos, Laura Gross Henrich, Donna Dingle, Charles Smith, Leslie Pohl-Melman, and Jane Savitt-Tenon, who really were the heart and soul behind this, this commemoration. So the Board of Directors will now vote on the following resolutions. I'm going to read the resolution and then we're going to vote on it. Whereas public schools are the backbone and foundation of our democracy, providing young people with the academic knowledge and tools they need to maintain our nation's precious values of freedom, civility, and equality. Whereas we express profound regret and apologize for maintaining segregated and unequal public schools at any time in our history. Whereas we honor the citizens who demanded educational equity for all of our children, most notably the members of the NAACP mainline branch under the leadership of Isabel Long Strickland. Whereas we honor the Board of Directors of 1963 for responding to the demands made to address the unequal resources and inferior education provided to the predominantly African American students at Ardmore Avenue Elementary School. Whereas the decision to ensure equitable resources to all children began with a board vote on August 26, 1963, to close Ardmore Avenue Elementary School and send its 223 students, 80% of whom were African American, to 4 other elementary schools in the district. Whereas the moment of integration, therefore, formally began with the opening of school on September 5th, 1963. Whereas the Ardmore Avenue Elementary School played an important role in the support and cultural practice within the African American community, the burden to pursue an equitable educational experience was just as important, and therefore fell heavily on the shoulders of the families of the children who had attended Ardmore Avenue Elementary School. Whereas the Ardmore Avenue Elementary School families and communities and community advocates took on the responsibility of insisting their children receive a quality education, the benefits of equality and racial integration occur to all of our children and the entire community. Whereas the hopes and dreams of the promise of integration and equality are still a work in progress and requires the efforts of the entire community, now, therefore, be it resolved that the board recommits to ensure that each student, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, religion, disability, socioeconomic status, or any other form of discrimination, receives the educational opportunities necessary to ensure the fulfillment of that student's potential. The Board of School Directors proclaims September 5th a day to honor and remember the moment of integration in perpetuity. So that's the resolution. Do I have a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Mr. Holland, would you mind coming up to the podium, please, for just a minute? Denise, you have the... So we wanted to give you this copy of the resolution because the class of 70, under your leadership and the other people I mentioned, have given, as I think Dr. McGinley put it, such a gift to the school district with all the work that you have done to ensure that this amazing history is not lost on us and that it really helps us to educate students moving forward. So we'd like to give you this copy. And I don't know, do you want to say? No. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so after that, perhaps more interesting resolution, we're now going to move on to something we need to do, which is the election of Pennsylvania School Board Association officers. So we belong to the Pennsylvania School Board Association, and we have a new way of voting for the leadership. The board will take a vote, and then based on that vote, we get essentially one vote per district to the board. Makes sense. So I'm going to move at this time. I'm going to propose that we vote for President-elect Mark Miller. So for Mark Miller, do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Jerry. And do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Suba. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. I'm now going to propose that we vote for Charles Ballard for Vice President. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Jerry. Second, sorry.
I second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. I'm now going to propose that we vote for Otto Voigt for treasurer. Do I have a motion to approve?
I so moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. And finally, for representative for our area, I'm going to propose we vote for Maura Bury. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. And we're choosing to elect those members because we think that they will sort of represent us vigorously in supporting public education. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Dr. McGinley.
Okay, hopefully they will. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 2013-2014 school year. I'm pleased with the start that we've had to this school year. We've had a number of issues as we began with some of the logistics of relocating offices in our buildings, and we'll talk a little bit more about that next week, and utilizing portable classrooms at Gladwin as we did relating to our enrollment growth, and we're still almost there at Welsh Valley. We knew that was going to be a close call, but we'll talk more about that next week. This evening, we have a pretty full agenda of things that we'd like to share with the board and with the public. I want to talk briefly about where we are in the timeline to discuss the proposal for expanded choice for high school students. And then Mr. Orlando, our business manager, and George Sundell from Sundance Associates will talk about the enrollment projections that we have and explain them and discuss where we see the enrollment going in the future. Also, Dr. Marseille, Mr. Eveslog, and Mr. Hughes will talk about our current and future high school programming in light of increased enrollment and in consideration of the proposal to expand choice beyond the current walk zone connected with Lower Merion High School. So just a reference to where we are. Last week, as part of the timeline that's posted on our website that we posted in June, we identified at which meetings we would be discussing considerations for expanded choice for high school students. And so we are in the September block. And so last week, we did send a letter home, and we did post the projections in discussion with the board. I understand the projections need some additional annotation and some additional labeling for greater clarity, and we will work on that. We also had a brief discussion about the status of the AR connected with Policy 206 in the policy committee meeting on Friday. This week, we're here this evening, and we are also back here on September 18th, so on Wednesday evening, with a communication committee meeting to which we've invited representatives from the civic associations to go through a lot of what we're going through tonight and try to make sure that people are clear about where we see things at this point. On Thursday morning, we have a facilities committee meeting, and that at that time we'll be able to report on facilities issues that are under review and investigation. We have a lot of information, and then there's some information that we need a little bit more time for, things like the traffic studies that we couldn't do in the summer. We had to do at a time when school was under operation, and so we're looking at those things, and so there'll be some more reporting on those issues in the October meeting. So I just want to talk briefly about where we are with our enrollment. We had an enrollment study done by DeJong Healy used the 11-12 data and projected for 12-13 and 13-14. This table that will be posted is really clear to everybody, I'm sure, just on its face. But the solid lines on this table are the DeJong Healy projections. And the dotted line is the actual enrollment for each of the 6 elementary schools. So if you look at the top line, that blue, light blue, that's the Gladwin projected enrollment, and the dotted line shows you the actual, and you see that we are at Gladwin pretty much exactly where DeJong Healy expected us to be, and that is also the case with the next line down, which is the greenish one, which is the Penn Valley projection. So we are right where we thought we would be. The one elementary school that's considerably out of whack with the projections is the orangey line down the center, which is the Penn Win line. And Penn Win, we're about 80-some students ahead of where we were projected to be by the DeJong Healy study. The other schools are either slightly above or slightly below. That green line is Kimwood, showing slightly below where we thought it would be, and Belmont Hill slightly above. And we were able to accommodate all of those students at Penn Win because Penn Win had a lot of classroom space in it that was not fully utilized. So fortunately, we're able to accommodate that population, but we are certainly keeping our eye on Penn Win. When we move to the middle schools, we see this green line is the projected enrollment. The solid line is projected enrollment for Welsh Valley, and the dotted line shows that the Welsh Valley population is running ahead of expectations. So it was a little further ahead than projections last year, but it's still ahead of projections. And Ballackinwood line is just about right there, a few kids short of the actual projection. And when we move to the high schools, again, following the same pattern, solid line is the projection, and the green line at the top is Lower Merions. The solid line shows what is projected, and the dotted line with the little purple balls on it shows that Lower Merion's running just slightly ahead of where we thought it would be. And at Harriton, they are just about exactly where they should be, just a few kids short of the projections. So last year at this time, our overall student population was 1% ahead of what DeJong Healy projected for us as a school district. And this year, based on Thursday's numbers, we're not at the 10-day enrollment. We'll have that in the next couple days. But based on Thursday's numbers, we're running 1% ahead of the DeJong Healy projections. So we feel that they were fairly accurate projections based on the first couple of years. We'll have the 10-day enrollment within the next few days, and we'll come back on Monday and report on that. That's listed as something that we'll do on the 23rd at our business meeting. We'll give an additional update on the enrollment, because the 10-day enrollment is the official enrollment that we report to the state, and that's better for us to use for the apples-to-apples comparison. At this time, Mr. Orlando is going to walk through the enrollment projection that is posted on the website and give some background information about that projection, and then we will Mr. Sundell will also talk about that projection, and we'll move into a discussion of programming moving forward.
Just 2 quick points. The facilities meeting, which is in the morning, is it possible for that to be televised, since it's difficult for many people to attend?
They are. Yeah, I'm sorry. I skipped over this note at the bottom of this slide about the timeline. The full schedule for all meetings is on the website. Meetings where we're discussing anything about high school enrollment or expanded
Right.
choice are being recorded and posted on the website.
And then in terms of the Sundance analysis, that will be posted, or are you going to hold off posting it until?
No, our practice is that when we do a presentation the next day, we post the items that were presented, and we're presenting the substance of that report tonight, and we'll post the report from Sundance by tomorrow. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Orlando.
Thank you, Dr. McGinley. I just want to note one thing before we get started. On this slide here, you'll notice we have highlighted in yellow the 17-18 school year. That is the year of the first impact if the board so chooses to go to expanded choice. So we just make that clear. If the board does elect expanded choice, the 14-15 year would be the first year and to be minimum impact. So if you're in, I guess, 14, 15 through the 16, 17, if you're a 10th, 11th, or 12th grader, okay, that is be pre expanded choice. So those numbers would not fully impact if you decide to do expanded choice. That's what we wanted to note with this particular slide. Okay, let me run through the numbers for you. So that we've highlighted the first line. This is the Dijon Healy original numbers, which have been posted for quite a while now, dealing with the enrollment study. So one thing I want to note there is the current boundaries are in place in the Dijon Healy original numbers. And if you look at the chart, both high schools will be at exceed capacity within the next 5 years. So we just want to note that on those. Okay. Looking at the Dijon Healy no choice numbers. So this would be if there was no walk zone, if there's no expanded choice, and if you're strictly looking at the feeder to the two schools. So if you have Walsh Valley Middle School, that feeds to Harrington, and then the BC Middle School would feed to Lower Marion. So that's strictly what we looked at on those particular numbers. So if you look at the walk zone numbers, basically it's about a 60-40 split, with about 40% going to Lower Marion. So we would have to then, if there was no choice and now they're going to go to Harrington, there's about 123 students in the 14-15 year then will be added back to the original Dijon Healy number. So if you look at 1,216, there's about 123 students who now have the option to go Lower Marion if they had no choice and had to go to Harrington. That would increase that enrollment by 123 students. We then looked at the other years, 15-16. There's approximately 126 students that have the option to go to Lower Marion High School. If they did not have that option, no choice, that would increase the Harrington numbers by 126 students. And then in this, the same type of rationale, in the 16-17 school year, there would be 132 students, additional students added to Harrington. In 17-18, there would be 138. And then in the preceding year, next year, there'd be 148. 158 students would be added, 164 and 166. So you can see with the no choice, it increases the Harrington High School enrollment numbers over those years. On the opposite of that, if you're taking students away from Lower Marion High School and now bringing it into Harrington, that's going to reduce the line Dijon no choice for Lower Marion. So that same 123 students now gets deducted from the Dijon Healy original number of 1,324. That brings that number down to 1,201 students, okay? And then if you go into the next year, the 1,415 less 126 students, that would bring the enrollment down to 1,289. In the 16-17 school year, the Dijon Healy original number was 1,425. If you do not have choice, now that reduce it by 132 students down to 1,293. In the next year, it would be reduced by 148 students, 138 students, 9 students. That would bring it down to 1,323. And then if we go on to the next year, 148 students would be decreased from the original number down to 1,319. And then if you go on to the next year in 1920, there's 158 students now that would be removed from Lower Marion High School. That brings that number down to 1,318. And then in 2021, there is 164 students now that would not have a choice and then would go to Harrington, which would lower the Lower Marion number down by 164, down to 1,378. And then in the last year, it'd be 166 students who now would have a choice would go to Harrington, which would reduce the Lower Marion High School numbers. Okay, so that's how we came out with the Dijon no choice numbers that are highlighted.
Hey, Vivek, can you just explain, is the first line the status quo?
First line, the original is status quo.
That's where we are today with the
Correct.
choice.
Current boundaries in place. That's the way it is right now. Correct. Okay. The next set of numbers, what we did here then, we looked at Ballacua Middle School adjustments. So there are students who have the opportunity to attend Harrington from the Ballacua Middle School So we looked at, since there's been some fluctuation with the new school coming on and some of the other programs, a 4-year average of what those additional adjustments or students from BC that would attend Harrington. So in the 14-15 year, we project an additional 15 students from BC. So that brings that number. The second row, the 1,339, up 15 students to 1,354 students. And then as we add on the cohorts, it brings it up another 32 students in the 15-16 year, coming into Harrington, and 48 students get added to the no choice for the BC adjustment. It brings up to 1,483. And then if you look in the next year, there's 64 students, brings it up to 1,570. And then you have 65 students coming in on the 18-19 year, bringing that adjustment up to 1,672. And then 66 additional students because of the BC in the 2019-20 year. And then we have in the 2021 year, another, looks like 69 students coming on board. So that would also bring that number up. Obviously, if we're taking those numbers from the BC, which you normally go to Lower Marion, that reduces those numbers by those figures that I did mention to you. So that's kind of where we're at with that line, talking no choice and BC. Okay.
Vic, I just, on that point.
Yeah.
So the factor you're using as you increase from year to year for the number of students from BC that choose to go to Harrington? So we start at 15 and
Start at
obviously
15
more, and is it plus 1%?
Well, then we use the growth projections from DeJohn Healy
Okay,
to then try to
okay,
bring them through
from year to
through
year,
the
so
year.
a slight
Correct.
increase each year?
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. Okay. Then we get down to the bottom three set of figures. This is called expanded choice. So if we expanded the choice, we had the walk zone, what is the total choice now projection of students? So we looked at a 60-40 split, Harrington versus Lower Marion. Look at a 50-50 split, and then we look at a 40-60 split with expanded choice. Okay, so if we look at the first set of numbers, so if you look at Harrington, where it has expanded choice 60% Harrington, 40% Lower Marion, it shows enrollment will be 1,213. So what we did there is we looked at the total number of choice students. So in that year, it's 353 students. Okay, so we said if 40% of those now from Harrington High School are going to go to Lower Marion, we need to reduce that by 141 students. So if you look at the line above, the 1,354 number is reduced by 141 students. So now it gives us, in that particular line for expanded choice, 1,213 students. Okay, so then I'll move on to the next year. So now we project, the total choice projection is 412 students. And if there's a 40% are added back to Lower Marion, which means they're deducted from Harrington, is 165 students. So if you take the 1,420, you subtract 165 students, you now have an enrollment of 1,255 students in that particular option. Okay. If you go then to the 16-17 school year, there are 480 students in the projected choice area. 40% of those will be 192 students who now will be going to Lower Marion High School, reduces the no choice BC Dijon line from 1,483 down to 1,291 students. Okay, and then if you look at the 17-18 school year, their total choice projection is 554 students. 40% of that would be 222 students removed from Harrington to Lower Marion, would be 1,348 students. And then if you go to the 18-19 school year, there's 591 choice students. 40% of those would go to Lower Marion. That would reduce the 18-19 Harrington enrollment by 236 students. If we get into the 1920 school year, the total choice is 628 students. 40% of those who now would go to Lower Marion would reduce the number of 251 students to 1,525 students. And then in the 2021 school year, the total choice projection is 649 students. 40% of those will be 260 students. So that reduced that Harriton enrollment population to 1,579. And then in the 21-22 year, there are 659 students. In that 40% now going to Lower Marion, reduced that number by 264 students down to 1,600 students even in the 2021-22 school year. So with those numbers now being added to the Lower Marion, obviously it brings that up by those numbers. So 141 additional students in the 14-15 year now get added to Lower Marion, brings that enrollment up to 1,327. The 165 get added to Lower Marion is 1,422 students. And then 192 students now get added to the Dijon No Choice BC adjustment at Lower Marion. That brings it up to 1,437. And then we proceed with those same numbers in each of those years. So you can see the enrollment will go up with that particular expanded choice option. Okay. The line where it has expanded choice 50-50 for Harriton and Lower Marion. And this is where we talked about that 17-18 with the full impact. We have to incrementally bring in some of those students because of the no choice of those students in the prior years, because again, they didn't have choice in 10th, 11th grade from the 14-15 through the 16-17 school year. So if we take that total choice number in the 14-15, which is 353 students, with the ninth graders in 14-15 who have a choice now, so you apply that 50% ratio. So if you have 120 ninth graders in the total choice, 50% of those would be 60 students. Then you have another 233 students in grades 11 through 12 who did not have the expanded choice option. So you have to apply the 60-40, which is basically what the ratio is now. So you have 40% of that number, which comes out to 93 students. So that becomes 53 students, 153 students between the two 50% and then the non-choice of the 0.4. So if you look at Harriton in the 14-15 year, so if you look at the third line, which is 1,354 students, we subtract 153 students, and then we come up with 1,201 students in the expanded choice in the 50-50 at Harriton. Okay? So,
No, I think the rest of the 50-50 everybody gets. I mean,
Okay.
you know, go explain a couple on the other 40-60 line, and I
Okay.
think people have it.
okay, good. Okay, so then if we so the same methodology is throughout for all the other years. So in the 40-60 split, again, we have the total choice projection, 353 students. Again, if you have 120 students in that ninth grade, and now you're applying a 40-60 split, so now you're taking 60% of those 120 students who have choice is 72, and then we're again applying that 0.4 to those students who didn't have choice, the 233. Now you come at 165 students. So if you take the 1,354 students less now the 165 students, you come up with 1,189 in the 14-15 year using that 40-60 split. So you can see the Lower Marion numbers then get increased from 1,186 by 165 additional students. It brings that enrollment up to 1,351 students. So we're applying that same methodology throughout the remaining numbers.
So just to quickly summarize, if we expanded choice, 60% went to Harriton, 40% went to LM, it would be 2018-19 where the numbers tipped over 1,400.
Correct.
Okay.
18-19 is 1,436.
And then it wouldn't occur until the following year if it was 50/50 or 46? At Harrington.
Harrington,
Right.
correct.
Okay, just to clarify.
Question?
First, in one of the earlier presentations, the percentage, the allocations, there was a 75-25,
Correct.
and that seems to have disappeared, and it was replaced by the 60-40. So I want to know what was the basis of that decision? I guess who made it, why was it changed?
It was changed because we reviewed the numbers, and we reviewed this issue actually with our consultant also. We don't see that that's a viable assumption to make, that it would go back to 25-75. Part of the presentation that we want to make here this evening is an explanation as to why we think that's unlikely, and so that's part of the future presentation here tonight.
And when you say go back,
We have the numbers, and we can post them.
that's fine, but when you say go back, that's what it had historically been prior to redistricting, and then for the
for 2
reasons you're going
years-
to present tonight, you're going to say it won't go back, but that's what it had been
For
historically.
2 years prior to redistricting, it was a 25-75 split, with the kids who had an option to go to Lower Merion from Walsh Valley selecting, 75% of those kids selecting going to LM. And I only had 2 years' worth of data on that, going back to the time when we did redistricting. And that's the reason why I included that in the spring when I showed the numbers, and we'll show them again, but we don't think that is at all a likely outcome.
I mean, it may be helpful if you don't mind, it seems straightforward math calculation, if you could add that on, that'd be helpful. And, and in terms of people.
Do we have the table?
We have at the end.
We have the table.
Okay. Anyway, and if the walk zone is expanded, the only students, each year it's just one grade, then it'll be 2 grades, and then it'll be 3 grades, and then ultimately fourth, and that 4-year total will be the number that the percentages are applied against. Is that correct? So that if you look at, I guess, table number 3, in the year 24, the Sundance report. So the first year, 2014-15, the number of students that are in play, is it just 120 and not the 353? And then each year it'll grow as you add another year class
I
into it?
think Vic is
Well,
better
the-
position as that.
Right.
Yeah, I
it-
guess I just misunderstood what you did.
Well, in the 14-15 year, in the 9th grade, that'd be the first, if you decide to do expanded choice, that would be the first year.
And that's
and
the
it-
big percentages would be applied against the number 120.
Correct, where I talked about with the 50 and the 40-60 split, correct, that's applied to those. The other years, students in grades 10 through 12 would be I call it pre-expanded choice, and that was in the 64, that's the 60-40 split, which is currently what we are experiencing. Okay. I'm going to introduce George Sundell from Sundance Associates. George is a demographer who had opportunity to review these numbers, and George wants to kind of go through his methodology and conclusions based upon the analysis done on our enrollment projections. So, George Sundell.
Thank you very much, Vic, for presenting all those numbers. It's difficult to convey with any sense of entertainment, should we say. Something as difficult as those long series. It's probably equally difficult to talk also about things like methodology, but in brief, the methodology used to do the adjustments to the Jong-Healy projections are consistent with the same methodology, which is cohort survival methodology. It's used in Pennsylvania and also about 80% of all of the school districts nationwide to make projections for students. We do several adjustments there. We made adjustments as if there were no walk options today. That was the first one. And we did that simply by looking at the number, and we have counts for how many walk students there has been historically for 3 years, and we use that number to work with a future projection. Using the average of those 3 years, though, we grew the potential walk zone students at the same rates as DeJong Healy used for the Harriton High School projection, which is what boundary those students reside in. So our numbers are always going to add up to the exact same numbers that DeJong Healy used. That's perhaps one of the important things. And anytime we segment out a portion of the population, we grow them in the same rate that they were growing, consistent with the DeJong Healy. So that's true both of what we did. We did analysis for walk zone. We did analysis for expanded choice, the geography beyond walk zone that would be added. And we did a separate analysis for the increase in students from the middle school that would be going to Harriton relative to reasons like the IB program or the Penn State program or miscellaneous other things such as sports and that sort of thing. But there's been an increase in choice there. Always we were keying off of the rates of growth from the DeJong Healy report and historic counts that we could take right now relative to those, the size of that number for this minor geography. So that gives us a consistently accurate projection. We are simply reapportioning some of the students according to these adjustments, and we always will come up with a total between the two high schools that is the same as the DeJong Healy report. In as much as we are using really a revised cohort survival methodology, then and it is consistent and it is strongly accurate in terms of the methodology here. My conclusion is that the analysis is very useful. What we don't know perhaps is this last question that was on the table, which is the 40-60 split, a 50-50 split, that sort of thing. The future will tell us that, but we have the alternates there in order to consider its various implications. So I think that you have a good analysis and a good, strong point of departure for discussions on function and use of the high schools.
Thank you very much. Do board members have questions? Do you want to start? Go ahead, Diane.
I'm sorry, before you sit down, I just have two questions. First, we've been seeing in the news lately a lot of talk about apartment buildings potentially being developed almost exclusively on the eastern side of the district. Those did not come into play in any of these numbers, correct?
That is correct,
okay.
Except to the extent they
Extent
may
that-
have been accounted for in the DeJong Healy study already.
Right, but
no
that would
new-
be through the growth, the survival ratios, not by specific knowledge of what buildings, because we don't know yet what buildings are going
Well,
in.
there was some new housing in their study, whether it's the same or different than
No,
what you're
this is
talking
different
about.
because
I don't know.
these haven't even been approved yet, but there's, I
Okay.
think, what, 4 or 5 of them at least that are,
Whatever was approved at the time of the DeJong Healy study is factored in.
Right.
And they gave that consideration, but there are some other larger developments that have been approved since then.
Right.
And certainly they're not in these numbers
Right.
anywhere.
like the building, the old seminary building next to Lankenau Hospital and the Miriam Estate, and we still don't know what's going to happen with St. Charles. So okay, so those are not included in these numbers. And then the other thing, the other question I had regarded the survival ratios in the DeJong Healy report. If I'm not mistaken, they're district-wide by grade, not building-specific. I think, so, we don't know Harriton's growth
No,
versus Lower Merion's growth.
They were both.
We know the high school growth.
The DeJong Healy report gave projections for both high
gave
schools,
projections,
and they were
but the
different growth rates.
Okay, because their survival ratio in their report was only district-wide.
Right, we used the growth rates as presented by their number, rather than just a single survival ratio, a year-to-year growth rate. It ultimately comes to the same conclusion.
Okay, well, and I printed up the right one this time because I quoted the wrong one last time. In the Jejong-Healy report, there is a page on survival ratios. It's page 17, S2 17. It's the only one in the report that I have that has survival ratios listed, and they're district-wide by grade and not building specific. They have projections that are building specific, but I think they just took these survival ratios and applied them to the building at the grade level that was
Right, and we worked
affected.
backwards from the projections at each of the schools to determine year-to-year growth rates, which statistically speaking would be the same, except you're right, we didn't have there, so the reports weren't presented with cohort survivals for the individual schools,
Okay.
which is why we used the annual year-to-year growth rate.
Okay, so this issue affects it either way, because in the yearly survival ratios, it includes for the 8th to 9th grade cohort, the 4 years where the new high schools were coming online. So, if you look at it, there's a for 2 years, the population at the high school level drops during the construction, and then once the buildings opened up, the thing sort of bounces up 7% one year, 8.6% one year, 8.7% one year. So I think there may be, I just think it's important to keep in mind that there, in the projections, there was a significant change in the high school opportunity and when those new buildings came online, and I suggest that it may have skewed the survival ratios slightly, because if there were people who pulled their kids out of the high schools because they didn't want their kids going to school in a construction site, and then when the high schools reopened, and right around that same time, the market crashed. So we had a sudden influx of students. So I'll be interested to see if the survival ratios hold, given 2 major events that could have had a momentary bump in our enrollments.
Yeah, which may or may not account for perhaps a 1% increase over the projection numbers in 2 years out.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're talking about something that's larger in magnitude than that or not.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you pull those four years out, the grossing ratio drops, or the survival ratio drops considerably, but it's still a positive number, not a negative number. So I'm just suggesting that may have an effect on what that survival ratio number is. And there was, it looks like in the Jejong-Healy report, there was no attempt to factor out those unique years. And I don't know whether in your profession, whether that's something you would do or not.
I would probably have to study the issue you're speaking of in greater detail to know, to be able to respond properly.
Okay.
I just have one quick question. I think you said at the beginning, and it just took me a minute to zone in. So your overall analysis is that the Jejong-Healy's use of the cohort survival methodology is the industry standard. That's the best practice out there, right?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely, yes.
Jerry?
Thanks for the presentation. Just a couple of questions. What is the relevance of the no choice row? And I don't know, Dr.
No.
Manley, if it's more of a question for you.
The no choice row was just a way to go back and double check the number count for the current walk zone and the other and the expanded choice zone. So the no choice was not an indication that anybody's considering having no choice. or no, no walk zone. It was just to go back and have a starting point so that we could do a careful analysis of the two areas, the immediate walk zone and the expanded choice area.
Okay, so I think it's important to note that nobody's proposing that, nobody has proposed it, but it's just,
I think in Mr. Sundel's report, which will be posted tomorrow, you can see why that was a necessary step in the table, which goes to the point of having some more clarity around what the table represents. It may be confusing to people because that's not anything that anyone suggested.
so in the projections that we had here, I'm looking at, I mean, you can look at any of them, they're all the same. You can go to, Vic, can you go to the, so the first row is the status quo. If the population expands as we project it to per the DeJong-Healy report, then this is where the students will fall in each school, per year. Then if we take away choice, what choice is there now?
Choice in the Walton is correct.
Yeah, so that's the second row, which nobody's proposing. And the third row is no choice, that same assumption, which nobody's proposing, plus the BC adjustment.
Which is BC choice.
Well,
Yeah.
it's the current BC choice, and, we believe that BC students have chosen in greater numbers than prior to go to Harriton for a variety of reasons. So it identifies that delta. Do we need a row of original plus BC adjustment to get?
It's already in there.
Which one's that?
That,
The BC.
It's not on that.
No, it's not there. Don't we need that row to show, isn't that the, if with the status quo, isn't that the number that we're projecting it would be?
Yes.
No, it's included in the original number, the BC choice.
We don't believe that the BC adjustment is included in the original DeJong number because the numbers shifted and they only had 2 years of data, and that we don't believe that was in
Right.
there.
So
That
you're
was
trying to show what the
discussion.
true numbers would be.
Correct.
In fact, at Harriton, you're saying it would be higher. So don't we
Yes.
need another row to show that? Isn't that the right number that we should be looking at for
Yes.
the no change?
We can show that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure. BC has had choice the whole way through.
Right.
So they were always included in the Harriton numbers.
Right.
So when you do the survival ratio to the Harriton numbers, it's going to include the BC kids because they're, except for maybe one or I don't know how many it's increased, maybe a couple kids, but I mean, I don't.
When we went back and looked at the numbers, we saw an increase in the number of kids coming from BC that was not accounted for in the DeJong-Healy report. We couldn't find a place where that was accounted for, which is why we have this BC adjustment. And in the report from Mr. Sundell, there's also a table prepared without that too, which would give you, but we saw no evidence that the BC number was in there. And we haven't had an increase in the number of kids coming from BC to Harriton. We have that factor in there to try to accurately reflect what's going on now.
Yeah, so just to put in my own words, the status quo based upon the DeJong-Healy numbers is the first row. Administration believes from counts that a higher percentage of BC students are going to Harriton, and so that's that delta between the second and third rows, and you'll add another row that shows that delta added to the current status quo to show what the numbers would be as we project them to be if no change were made in the choice area. Is that fair? Okay, thank you. So in terms of school capacity, what capacities are we using for each school?
We believe that 1,400 kids can be accommodated in the school, and that we can operate the same kind of program, instructional program. So teaching and learning will have the same set of options as it does today with 1,400 kids. If it was 20 more kids, we'd probably still be fine. But if you go beyond that number, much beyond the 1,400 number, given the buildings that we have, we would end up compromising our instructional program or compromising our professional programming, in that, the departments have departmental planning centers. We see them as an important part of a professional learning community. We'd like those to continue. Our schools have options that the board invested in order to provide the schools, like flexible learning spaces like black box theater and the large group instructional space and all those other kinds of things that we do not have regularly scheduled, but a teacher can take a class there or classes there and do things with, and we'd like to maintain all of those options. So when we give that 1,400 number, it doesn't mean you couldn't put more kids in there. You could put more kids in there, but once you go beyond that, we would see that as compromising the instructional program.
And then I don't know if I'm putting the cart before the horse, but in terms of capacity, if we do decide to expand choice and bring more students to Lower Merion, I think the proposal we've talked about, maybe not in a fully developed way, but is to use the admin building, classroom space. What do we project that capacity as?
We never actually projected a full capacity for that, but we have 21 classrooms in this building that could be used for instructional space. What I asked the principals to do, and they're going to do it shortly, I hope, is talk about what the next 5 years would look like, from their perspectives, given these projections.
And I assume that before we make a decision on choice, we'll have a discussion about the facility side. I know Thursday morning we're going to start having it at the facilities meeting, so we can kind of get a sense of what the options are, costs, et cetera. Yeah. Okay. And I think that my last question is somewhat related to that, and that is until we know what our options are, I don't know if we can answer this question, but what's the relevance of making the decision this year versus next year, for instance, or 2 years from now?
I said from the beginning that when a decision is made about this is really a judgment call. The advantage from our perspective for an early decision is that it gives us more time to adequately plan for facility modifications, to adequately address issues like parking, and it gives families information about the next several years. It's also been discussed at public meetings by members of the board that this may also prevent a time where kids would have to be compelled to go to one school or another, and that could be avoided. But from our point of view, having the additional planning time, looking at providing more parking for additional staff and students at each of the school sites is an advantage. So if we know what's going to happen within the next couple of years, that helps us a great deal. This year, we worked through, in the past academic year, we worked through issues around the elementary and middle school and to try to accommodate growth, and we were playing catch up. And so the more time we can have, the better off we are. But it really is, as the policy calls, the judgment of the board as to how this is done.
Thank you.
But also in terms of planning, school aside, we're dealing with a township which may impose certain restrictions or requirements, regardless of what site is chosen. And that I would think it's going to take a long process. Having gone through the high school and 3 elementary schools, that it's not a quick process. So that's an unknown. So I guess to go too early, you want to plan. You may elect a process and then find out later that through requirements imposed that were unforeseen at the time that a vote was taken may make whatever choice a bit more onerous and more difficult to implement. So, time works on both sides.
I think that part of the presentation that we're going to make tonight would lay out what we see as the timeline around the programming side, and that we could have a concurrent discussion about the facilities side. Mr. Ganan has been, to this rodeo a few times and is aware of the kinds of hurdles and deadlines that are in place. And he's backmapped, at least initially, a planning process as to when things would have to happen, and we'll be prepared to discuss that generally at the facilities committee meeting on Thursday.
And certain board members have been through it too, so we know how, the hurdles that are placed in front of us at times, somewhat onerous.
Are there other questions on this report right now? I have a question, I just don't want to. So I just want to clarify, and I'm sorry, sir, I forgot your name.
George.
Sundell. I was Sundance and Sundell, that's why I got confused. I apologize, sir. Thank you for your presentation. I just want to be clear here. You reviewed the DeJong-Healy report that was, that we had paid for an external consulting firm, obviously, to do the enrollment projections. That's correct, right? So, and in addition, we, at one point, internally had another firm as well who does enrollment projections, look at the DeJong.
They're a data management organization. They're not a firm that does enrollment projections, which is why we turned to Mr. Sundell.
Okay.
So they were really just, going back over and doing a look at our statistically reviewing the work that we had submitted to them. They asked some questions, they probed, they clarified some things about stepping in these groups for us, and they clarified things about the growth ratios, which led us to prepare a set of tables that we submitted to Mr. Sundell.
Okay, thank you. And you've found, and we've also found that we're running about 1% ahead of where we thought we would be based on the DeJong-Healy.
Right.
And that's within the margin of error that DeJong-Healy had given us. And that's sort of, you're saying, the standard of practice, and you feel that that report met the standard of practice?
Yes.
So, I mean, one of the questions that I'm sorry, did you want to?
No,
Okay, one of
I'm
the-
saying yes to what you assumed there.
Okay, thank you. So one of the questions that I've been getting is that, we have the DeJong-Healy report. We've actually gone to additional external consultants to review these reports and to give their expert opinion. And clearly when the high schools were built, there was a series of projections, which obviously those projections are no longer holding at this point in time. So I'm just wondering, Dr. McGinley, if you are aware of, at that time, what type of external consultant was used and what their margin of error was.
I really don't know what was used at that time to do any kind of a review of the projections before the high schools were built. Do you know that, Mr. Ganan? I know.
I'm not aware that any outside consultants.
I'm sorry, can you go up to and
just
say
said-
that? I didn't hear
Go
that.
ahead.
My immediate recall is, I don't recall that any outside was, but we could check on that. I know a document that would have that information.
Okay, thank you. So we've now, I just want to clarify that we've, under Dr. McGinley's guidance, Dr. McGinley's guidance, we went to an external consulting firm with expertise in this area. We've now had 2 firms review it, and we are within 1%.
I want to clarify, Tembo does data analysis.
No, there was a firm
And-
that we looked internally with the new, is that the same firm? The
Tembo,
new-
right.
That's the New Jersey.
Data
Okay.
analysis. And then we went to Mr. Sundell, who does this
Okay.
kind of work full-time.
But they had looked at the original DeJong-Healy report
They
for us
reviewed
as
the-
well and
right.
said that they would have used the same methodology. I just want to be clear about that. Okay, so that's where we're at now. All right. Thank you very much for those clarifications.
Okay, I want to follow up on one thing you said, because the projections that we used prior to this one was, we used the straight line method and the retention method. Scott Schaefer, our business manager, would project the enrollments moving forward, and he used those 2 methods as his method for projecting numbers. I don't know if you're familiar with those, whether they're reasonable. I mean, I think the bigger issue is, as you go out, it's 1% per year, each year going out, and we're now 6, 7 years out from when those numbers were done. And I think, it's important to remember that the further out you go from now, the greater the
I
discrepancy can be, and these could be way low. I mean,
These
it's
could
possible
be.
one way or the other, but we just don't
That's
know
what
how
they're not.
accurate.
That's right. So, but I just want to clarify that we've been working with external consultants on this process over the last year. So thank you. I think that, do you want to?
We want
next?
to shift to Dr. Marseille.
Thank you very much.
And you want to just and we want to talk about the high school programming, looking forward.
Good evening. I think Dr. McGinley began the introduction with regards to the next two presentations. What we wanted to do for the board was provide two presentations from our high school principals, Mr. Everslog from Harriton and Mr. Hughes from Lower Merion High School. So in light of the conversations around enrollment, what Mr. Everslaw is going to show you briefly is that we asked principals to take a look at their program over the last 5 years. And we know that for a myriad of reasons, both schools are different schools compared to where they are now versus in 2000 and 2008 in terms of programmatic instructional components. So Mr. Everslaw is going to talk to you about what does Harriton look like now versus to how Harriton looked like in 2008. Then our next presentation will have Mr. Hughes, who's going to talk about what could be some of the programmatic instructional impacts of moving students or moving courses to the district administrative office. And there was conversation about the number of facilities or rooms that we have available. And part of that conversation is really about if we maintain the same type of programming, what that would look like in the DAO, knowing that we are in the process of moving into a 5-year planning process for our strategic plan, knowing that there might be some programmatic and instructional shifts that we might do in light of that planning. But his presentation, Mr. Hughes, is going to take a look at our current programs if they were to exist at the district administrative office. So with that, Mr. Everslaw is going to walk through a look at Harriton in 2008 versus Harriton in 2013, and he'll pass the mic off to his colleague, Mr. Hughes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marseille. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see everybody. Just to start, I wanted to share my personal perspective. I bring a unique perspective, I believe, in talking about this situation. Having been at 3 and worked in 3 of the 4 secondary schools within the district. I mean, my second year at Harriton. Prior to that, I was at Walsh Valley for 3 years, and I was at Lower Merion High School in 2006 to 2008. And I was at Lower Merion at a time before the new buildings, of course, were built. Before when the choice pattern was in a manner which what we're now calling the expanded choice area. That was the choice area at that time. And while it's difficult to look back and speculate why students and families chose the schools that they did, there certainly was a perception, however true or untrue that may be, that a smaller school like Harriton would somehow limit options for students, whether that was a course option, a co-curricular opportunity, or a programmatic change. And so Harriton, while always a unique and great school, certainly carried that perception, true or untrue. We all know that conditions have changed, and since 2008, enrollment patterns have changed. There are new buildings. There's been intensified communication and alignment between the high schools, and resulting in greater curricular, programmatic, and structural alignment. So we're speaking from a different state of affairs now. I'd just like to speak to some of those. Obviously, the enrollment differences between 2008 and 2013 is significant, from 791 to where we are today with 1186. One fear, 2008 fear, that was reporting from anecdotal feedback from families and students, was a lack of potential course offerings, especially at the AP and honors level at Harriton, was viewed as a potential lack of opportunity for students. Students feared perhaps they would not get into the AP or honors courses they had hoped to. As you can see, the AP offerings have significantly changed at Harriton since 2008, almost doubling the honors courses that are offered, and offering 5 more AP courses. And all of the AP and honors courses that are offered at both schools. The IB program is a unique program to Harriton, and even though enrollment has grown, IB participation rate has grown even more rapidly than the enrollment growth, with a greater proportion of juniors and seniors enrolled in IB courses than ever. And currently, we have 32.7% of juniors and seniors. That number, 32.7%, is the percentage of juniors and seniors that are participating in the IB experience, as opposed to 9.7% in 2008. And as you can see, the percentage of students is not only increasing, but the diplomas earned has more than doubled, including offering 8 bilingual diplomas and offering expanded IB course offerings online. Of the 116 diploma students that we currently have at Harriton, 15 of those students are students that attended Ballackinwood Middle School. The Penn State dual enrollment program is also offered at Harriton. No such program existed at that time in 2008. That program grew to 2012, 2013, where we had 45 students enrolled in the program. Those students, of course, take 4 Penn State courses. They are accepted into Penn State University and have those 4 classes as college credits as they graduate from Harriton. The list of courses, expanded course offerings at Harriton is impressive. Every year the school's added more course offerings. Every department in the building has expanded course choices with a growing menu of electives in every area, including art and music. Courses that are offered at both schools are identical. The courses that are run at both high schools is nearly identical based on student enrollment choices. Course enrollment choices. So the differences between the schools as far as courses is really negligible. There's 2 slides of different courses that have been added since 2008. And you can see the wide range of courses that are offered currently at Harriton that was not in 2008. Within the realm of athletics, there's been significant changes. First and foremost, Harriton has joined the Central League, which is the league in which Lower Merion participates. That's offered significant advantages for our student athletes. A high percentage of students participate in athletics in both schools, and the advantages of being in the Central League have not only the travel benefits. The student athletes are traveling to schools much closer to Harriton. But there are more contests in each of the sports, and specifically with the 7 schools that we competed against in the Del Valle League. Many of those schools, including one that's an all-boys school, had offered incompatible athletic offerings. So many of our student athletes, this negatively impacted girls much more than boys, but many of the schools in that league, in some points 4 of the 7 other schools, did not offer a sport like girls lacrosse or girls tennis. So students that were participating in that league, unfortunately, were denied those opportunities to play. It was challenging filling full schedules with many of those teams. Since then, we've added more 9th grade sports opportunities from just 1 sport in 2008 to basketball, soccer, baseball. We have had 9th grade football. We do not currently this year, but we have in years past. And we had a shared ice hockey team with Lower Merion in 2008. Now both schools have their own ice hockey teams. In addition to the facilities, which of course have been upgraded with the construction, we are, with growing enrollment, increasing increasing enrollment, participating in the highest PIAA level in most sports, and I can proudly say we're doing quite well and being very competitive at that high level, including girls lacrosse state championship last year against the largest schools in the state. So before I turn it over to Mr. Hughes, in summary, the next 5 years with the enrollment projections, regardless of how the distribution of students is split, we expect in the next 5 years to be able to accommodate the programming over this time with our current facilities and maintaining the integrity of the programs that we offer. We are acknowledging that there are going to be challenges with increased enrollment, and we are thinking about what those may be internally and planning for the challenges which we think will directly impact us in the next 5 years. It could be lab space with science labs, as well as looking at bell and classroom schedules with the addition of most likely needing a fourth lunch to be scheduled into our day, which will require us, we would go through this process with Lower Merion, of course, because of the sharing of resources, look at a potential bell and class schedule that would accommodate the number of students we have without sacrificing programs. Okay. All right, Mr. Hughes?
Good evening, everybody, and happy Monday to you all. I'll try not to go so long. I only have 161 slides, and being the last speaker, I will try to move through these as quick as possible. As Mr. Everslog, my esteemed colleague, mentioned his perspective of being 3 buildings. I've been in the district now for 17 some years and been only at Lower Merion, and have seen a lot of this process from the work. Both as a teacher, athletic director, assistant principal, and principal, and hopefully not crossing guard tomorrow after this presentation, but I'll try to manage through. What I'd like to do is kind of make some comments in terms of, where we've been. My esteemed colleague talked a lot about programming and what we've seen, the difference, from 2008 to 2013 at Harriton, and all of the topics that Mr. Everslog just presented are things, of course, the programming wise that we do have at Lower Merion. Now both schools have them, and as you can see as this graph up here, over the last 5 years for Lower Merion, we've seen a decrease in enrollment, and in the last 3 years, we've pretty much been keeping stable between the 1280 and the 1310 mark, and we've still been maintaining all of the programs that Mr. Everslog had spoken about. But there was a time when in early 2000s, about 2004, when Lower Merion did see a spike in enrollment, and at one point it was even up to 1,625, and it was just shown on that last slide. But I think there's some parts that we do have to remember during the time period, as it was a completely different building, and we were dealing with completely different issues at the time. We had a different schedule, and since 2010, as Dr. McGinley stated, the opportunities with our new facility have just expanded upon what we do for education nowadays. And again, not to restate some of the wording that Dr. McGinley had spoken about, but from our black box theater and the opportunities that provides us with our theater arts program to our department planning centers, and the times have changed where we are, planning teacher collaborations, getting to know our students better, and working through the collaboration process. So we do have department planning centers, DPCs. We do have an extensive art wing. We do have large group instruction areas. We have small group instruction areas. So opportunities have changed in what we're looking at now with an enrollment growth. So what I'd like to kind of present now is what planning stages and what we're looking at present for the next couple of years. Our new building gives us, as I just stated, so many flexible, so many opportunities. And of course, as Dr. McGinley stated, and again, we want to make sure we're maintaining the educational program that we have. We currently do use the the DAO, this building right now. We actually use this building for physical education classes during the day, almost every set of the day. And then we do use this building after school for athletics. We run freshman basketball programs out of here. We run volleyball programs out of here. And we actually still use the gym here to compete. So we actually do use this building presently, and we have since we moved into the facility in 2010, that we've had the interaction of teachers and classes over here and going back and forth. Right now, 2013, 2014, and 2014, 2015, we will continue status quo in terms of using Lower Merion High School, and continue to plan on utilization of the building as it exists right now. And if we need firmer enrollments, as Dr. McGinley said, up till the 1,400 of where we can expand in certain classrooms within the building. And we will continue to use the DAO currently for our physical education classes and for our extracurricular activities after school. The DAO does, which we actually used to call it Lower Merion High School Building A, and so I'll use that referenced in the next couple of slides. We have, or soon available to us, will be roughly around 21 classrooms over here. 14 on the third floor, 5 on the second floor, and 2 on the first floor. So for the next 2 years, we will remain at Lower Merion High School. We're still using this building for our physical education classes. So this is what our timeline would look like. 2015-16, if we see the first peak of enrollment, we will begin to utilize 4 classrooms in the DAO, Lower Merion High School Building A. This will be based on course registration from the 2014-15 school year. The 4 classes we will presume will be related to some sort of the elective courses. And they could be anywhere from economics and our statistics, economics being social studies elective, to statistics as a math elective, to oceanography as a science elective, to creative writing as an English elective. It would be dependent upon course enrollment and the number that we would produce for each of the classes, but we see no more than using only 4 classrooms in the current building that we are in right now. By 2016-17, our timeline would increase by 4 more classrooms. So we would utilize 8 total classrooms on the first and second floors and of this building, Building A. And at that point, we will be moving to a 9th grade classes of social studies and English. Right now, yeah.
On the earlier slide, you said there were only 5 on the second floor, 2 on the first, and now you're saying there were 8 on the first and second. So where's the 8th classroom located?
On the
It's relocating an office.
correct.
It's taking a room at the end of the hallway upstairs as an office. They're relocating it so we can keep it all on the first and second floor.
So we'll try to do as minimal disruption to the floors.
There's more than the number of rooms. Some rooms are used as offices, like right above us is all used as offices, but they're configured as classrooms. So in order to keep everybody on 2 floors in that year, we would relocate an office, and that way the kids are on 2 floors and not 3.
Correct. We would, if I go back to this slide on 2016-17, we will build a schedule, which is something we actually used to do, where we would go back-to-back classes. So a 9th grade student who would have English would then have their social studies class, or vice versa, social studies first and English class. This is very common. Even now we do this, not all the time, but depending. Our 9th grade students are in what we call PLCs, professional learning communities, and that allows our teachers to share kids and to collaborate based on students. It's a good way of actually getting to know your students, and your teachers share the resources of what they have with the students and connecting in knowledge. So we would move from the elective part into beginning a 9th grade program of social studies and English courses, and that would allow us to use take up spaces for 8 classrooms and using just 2 of the floors. Jerry?
Just a clarification, you talk about enrollment growth. Which assumption are you basing this upon?
This is based on the range of the 40-60, 60-40, 50-50, that range, not knowing where.
So based upon a change in the...
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So with a gradual increase we would project the numbers to increase more by 2017-18, 2018-19. We would then move to utilize the third floor classroom spaces. So, and what we would at that point look at would be to build a freshman half-day schedule, and at both Lower Merion High School main building and Lower Merion High School Building A. If you look at a typical schedule of a ninth grade student, which I will place up in a second, to keep the schedule, which we think is an excellent schedule for a ninth grade, it provides a variety of experiences, and it also still keeps with your Common Core classes. It would also keep with what we're currently doing at both high schools with the professional learning communities. It builds collaboration with not only the teachers but within the students. We think by doing this with a ninth grade, it would be a good way to keep exactly what we're doing, and with the utilization of the extra classrooms that we would have on this side, we can continue our program. So what we would, since the social studies and English classes would already be over here, we would then incorporate a science classes over here. So students in the morning part of the schedule would have English, science, and social studies in this building A, while other ninth grade students in the main building would have math, world language, physical education, and any of their electives. And then you would end lunch, and you would see a switch at some point throughout the day.
Which sciences are you going to have?
Well, for
in here?
freshmen, it would be, for ninth grade students, it's biology.
So are some of them in chemistry? And would
No.
you accommodate them differently if they were? So you don't have any ninth graders in chemistry?
We've had a few, very few. And yes, we would have to accommodate for that. But the typical ninth grade schedule looks, and again, this is at both high schools, and we want to continue with keeping this schedule. Again, it allows you to have your core courses. It allows you to begin an elective course. It allows for a language. And we want to make sure that even with a slight increase or a larger increase in enrollment, we'll still be able to accommodate all of what we offer right now within those course frames. And still keeping with, as Dr. McGinley said earlier, our overall programming, keeping with our PLC models, keep use of our current building and all of the opportunities within that building, and not to have to remove anything. So for us, it's additional considerations. When you do have two buildings and a larger number of students coming over here, and again, I reiterate, we do use this building now, but some things that we do have to think about over here would be, a student service center with including assistant principal, counselor, nurse, and secretary, to continue to have a teacher planning center over here, and for most of what we always consider the most important thing is, making sure we have student supervision over here, considering with campus aides and campus security, which we do have at the moment, and to make sure that process. And as Mr. Evazog said, it will take a consideration of continuing to look at the high school schedules so we can continue to share resources and staffing as we go through this process. And as Dr. Marseille also mentioned, we do have a strategic plan that we will be looking into to talk about, what will future education look like for 21st century learning, and from online courses to internships. So what we are proposing right now is based on our current programming and what we're doing. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes.
Thanks.
Okay. That's all the information that we wanted to present tonight. I don't know if there are questions from the board around those issues.
Go ahead.
Mr. Hughes, thank you for the presentation. So the programming proposal is primarily ninth grade, moving or when it's necessary to use the DAO building. Mm-hmm. Could you speak to the professional learning communities a bit more? Are we talking about a teaming model? What would that look like for our freshman students?
Sure. We're on the year 3 of teaming. Now, teaming in the high school level is actually a lot different than at the middle school level. And the teaming at the middle school level, kids will know they're on teams and established there. The high school level, the teaming process, the professional learning communities are based on pulling the teachers together so that they have a better understanding of the students that they serve. And what, we build in time where there is, from not only just get to know, but it's a time period built in where the teachers can actually talk about the students that they have, share ideas, share resources, common language, common assessments, things revolving around the student achievement. And when they build that by the end of the freshman year, then that can be passed on to this, like for example, that could be passed on to the next level of teachers. So for instance, this year, both high schools have this first year with 10th grade teaming and 10th grade professional learning communities, because the term is really different when you look at it and think of the middle school model compared to a high school model. And it's incredible to actually do, because I don't care what anybody says, I think one of the hardest things to build is a high school schedule. It is probably one of the most complex components of what we do, and people that build those schedules are really thought-provoking type of people. So to actually build in this time and this collaboration piece is difficult. For the student's perspective, like I said, it's more than just one person knowing them, knowing their strengths, knowing their areas that they can work on. And by keeping them together within that teaming approach, we have seen some progress. Sure.
The presentation seemed to assume a certain outcome in terms of which students are going where. And I'm just curious, Scott, why you didn't present the other alternative, which is the possibility of expanding Harridan to accommodate the growth. It just seems that all the students, we haven't voted and we haven't received any information, so I'm just curious why it was kind of slanted to that perspective.
The proposal that the board has asked the administration to entertain and to give information about was a proposal to expand choice for Lower Merion High School. And that was the proposal that we were asked to address. And then there were other questions about facilities issues about both schools. And there was no assumption here that you're doing anything in particular, but that's what we were asked to present. If there were more kids coming to Lower Merion High School, what would we do? One thing that I felt was really important to point out was how different Harridan High School is today than it was in 2008. And that was the basis of the proposal. The board is free to act in whatever way they choose about high school enrollment.
Can I just clarify one thing, though, is that if we choose not to expand choice, we're still using this building based on the numbers at Lower Merion itself, correct? I just want to be clear about that.
If the board elects to maintain our current feeder
Yes.
areas, there are accommodations that we would need to make at both schools, physical accommodations.
But I'm saying you
And
would-
we would be using the DAO whether or not you make any change in November.
And part of the presentation, I guess, which will be made at the facilities meeting, we'll be exploring the other option.
Yes.
Okay.
We have some dollars and cents estimates about expansion at both places, and we were given a set of questions at the end of the school year last year around the Harridan side of things. What if we chose to accommodate the kids at Harridan?
And in addition to the dollars and cents, curriculum also how the building would be configured if there were the additional students and the addition to the building.
Right.
That'd be part of the discussion also.
Yes.
Okay.
What parts of the DAO, I'm not sure who I'm directing this to, but are actually student-ready right now?
We have 2 classrooms on the first floor that are fully equipped as classrooms. And there was always the plan that they would be used by Lower Merion High School. We haven't used them on a regular basis. We've only used them on an ad hoc basis. So those 2 classrooms are student ready, as is the gym and the locker rooms, which are in daily use. On the second floor, we have spaces that we use as meeting rooms now that are still set up as classrooms, and they have technology in them. And so, if there was, a problem of some sort and we needed, 4 classrooms tomorrow, that's no problem at all. When you go beyond 4 classrooms, it involves moving some people out of spaces, and it involves updating some spaces, because some of the rooms, like the rooms above us that we use as offices, have the the slate chalkboards in them, not whiteboards. There's other things that would need to be done. And then for daily use and long-term use, there's HVAC issues that would need to be addressed. And on the 3rd floor, which is why we like the idea of longer range planning, on the 3rd floor there's also restrooms that we chose not to renovate because we didn't see a need for them when we were approving the modifications to this building.
What's the nature of the HVAC upgrades we'd have to do?
The nature of the HVAC upgrades, Pat, do you want to talk about that?
In the DAO.
You'll recall that when we looked at the design for the renovation of this building, we deliberately broke out upgrading the HVAC. This is the 1960s era HVAC on a portion of the second floor and all the third floor, and bid that as an alternate. And we chose not to take that alternate. So if we are going to use this for instruction, we're going to have to upgrade this.
Okay. And will you talk more about that at the facilities meeting on Thursday? Or is that something further into the future?
No, I can talk about that, but we're still, it's at the concept level. I don't have any detailed designs.
The second and third floor are heated, but we have window air conditioners in the spaces that we're using.
Okay.
Right,
Yeah,
but we do have the infrastructure in the building that we can extend.
And the lack of immediate student readiness of the third floor, is that the same as those on the second, or is that more so than the second floor?
The third floor issue is the same similar conditions in the classroom spaces. There are some places where the ceilings would have to be, and the lighting might have to be modified.
We have a couple of rooms with ceiling. We did do some modifications last fall to accommodate the after-school program, so.
Right.
We probably have at least 2, maybe 3 that are, I would call, student-ready.
Okay, and then the bathroom issue you mentioned.
The bathroom.
We installed
there are no large group bathrooms on the third floor.
Right. And then we installed a new elevator that was code compliant.
Yes.
Yes.
Modern, okay.
And we did sprinklers throughout the building. So one of the things I have the architects looking at now is what are the implications if the code use changes from business to education? And so they're taking a look at that now. We're going to talk to the township.
Okay. And then could you talk for a minute, so we've had a lot of, we're actually in the process now of making changes to enhance the safety, entry and exit safety. So here we now, if we go this route, which it sounds like we're planning to do no matter what we do in terms of the choice area, we have an open breezeway now. We've had a lot of talk about keeping students in one building, containing access to the building. Could you talk for a minute about your thoughts on that as it relates to this
Well,
setup?
I mean, certainly the student safety is a concern. Both of the high schools were built with the assumption that kids were coming and going from the outside, or we wouldn't have the huge outdoor seating areas that we have in place every single day. So we also, have kids going and coming from the building throughout the day, going to fields at both buildings. So kids are outside at high schools in ways that they are not outside in elementary and middle schools. We would increase the number, but it's not a new problem, it's an increased problem of kids coming back and forth between the main building and Building A. That's going to happen whether or not you make any change in the feeder area, because we're going to end up using some parts of this building even if you maintain status quo. So we'd have to provide additional supervision with the traveling back and forth. We'd have to have people out there as the change of classes. We have a parking lot attendant that's out there now, but it's fairly minimal supervision, so there's no doubt that as the population increases that we will be adding campus aides. There's no doubt that we'll add back the counselor that we took away as the school got smaller, the assistant principal that we took away as the school got smaller. Those things will all have to be returned in order to adequately supervise the kids. When we have classes over here on a regular basis, I don't know if 4 is the trigger or 8 is certainly the trigger, then we envision an assistant principal's office being over here. But there would be supervised change of classes, and it would be something that we need to address. At the urging of board members, we have some information about the cost of a covered walkway between the two buildings, and that's something we'll discuss at facilities.
Thank you.
I just want to thank both of you. Those were great presentations, really helpful. Mr. Everslage, your pride in your school is just palpable. And Mr. Hughes, the amount of planning you've done already, I mean, to actually have specific electives that you envision, housing and all, I think that really, we're really making a lot of progress here. So thank you both. I do just want to make one quick comment on what Jerry said about the student movement. I mean, probably drive down Montgomery Avenue more than anybody except maybe Dr. McGinley. And I see the students going to Arnold Field constantly, and they're crossing a major street, and this is a lot closer. The distance is so minimal between the two buildings. It's nothing like going to Arnold Field where they go every day.
First, Dr. Hughes, or Mr. Hughes, I just want to say, it looks like you've come up with a really elegant solution to how to use this building. I think it really, it makes a lot of sense. I think it connects really closely with what you're trying to do in terms of the professional learning communities. So I think it's a great idea for the way to use the space. Might suggest you keep 9th grade PE over here too, so that they're all, since it's with the bio lab. It fills in one of the spots with the bio lab. Anyway, so I just throw that out there. So thank you very much. It looks like you guys gave a lot of thought to that, and it looks like it'll work nicely. Mr. Everside, you said something that just kind of caught my ear, and I want to make sure I heard that right. Did you give a number for how many BC students are in IB?
I did. 15. We have 116 diploma students currently at Harriton. 116 diploma students. Of those, 15 are students that went to Bala Cynwyd.
Okay. And how many in the Penn State program? Do you know?
There are 45. I don't. No, I do not know the number specifically that came from BC. I can get that number, but I do not have
great.
it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? Okay. All right. Thank you to both of you for those presentations. We really appreciate it. So I think what we're going to do now, which again is out of our usual order.
Would you mind if I allow the high school principals to go? We are going to take public comment, but it's 10 of 10, and they have a very early start tomorrow.
Absolutely,
Okay.
please.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding me of that.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And anyone who needs to go can go at any time, obviously. We don't lock no, you're going to stay extra for that one. No. So what we'd like to do now is take public comment. We're just going to take public comments. It's not a question and answer period at this point, but we do want to give people the opportunity, since we know there's a lot of interest. So the usual rules apply, which is you need to be a resident, 3 minutes, and I think those, and please state your name and residence when you come up. So can you please, if you're interested in giving public comment, can you please sign in with Ms. LaPera? Can everybody who wants to please sign in, and then we'll go from there. You can go ahead.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Hi.
You figured you would see me. You know, I think Mr. Hughes said the most
I'm sorry,
complicated.
I know we do
Oh,
know
I'm
who you are, but
sorry,
can you
you
just
know me,
say,
then-
just
okay.
for everybody else,
Yeah,
can you
Todd
say?
Sinai, I live in Marion Station.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I was starting to say, I think Mr. Hughes said that the most complicated thing was coming up with a high school schedule, but I don't think it's quite as complicated as trying to fit a growing number of kids in an existing physical plant. Right? This is actually a really hard problem, and I appreciate you tackling it, and I appreciate your persistence in coming back and having the meetings this fall. I think this has been a great meeting, and I appreciate the efforts that you're putting in to communicate with the public. I have sort of 3 brief comments, especially given how late it is and I have like 2.5 minutes left. They're based off of largely me doing this kind of exercise with my MBAs at Wharton, because this is kind of what we do when we think about managing real estate and fitting people into real estate, which is really the problem you have here. And when we think about it as managing risk and managing uncertainty rather than just trying to peg what we think the future is going to be and try and like map to that future. What we want to do is try and figure out what the contingencies are going to be. And I think there are things that you could do along the process that I hope you do that are going to help along with that. Right? The first is to focus more on growth rates and actually where enrollments are right now. So when you look at the report that Jajong Healy did, they focus on growth rates. When you listen to Mr. or Dr. Sundell, he was talking about growth rates. When Dr. McGinley talked about where enrollments are, he talked about where we are level relative to the projections, rather than where growth is going. And I think growth tells a different story. I think what we saw in the numbers that we saw tonight is that the growth in Lower Merion High School enrollments over the last year, it's only a year, you can't tell that much from it, but that growth was fairly significant. Harriton was flat. And what can we extrapolate that? Probably not, other than we have some uncertainty going forward. Right? Mr. Eveslog, did I pronounce that right? Had a really striking picture of enrollments at Harriton, especially during the transition period. It looked like a hockey stick, right? It was flat for a while, and then it was increasing. But if we extrapolated that from 2013, where he ended, to next year, it would be flat again. Big difference between if it continues to grow and if it continues to go flat, in what the policy that you should consider is. And you should consider policies that allow for that kind of uncertainty. Likewise, I think what you should do is be really clear about what's in your underlying data. I mean, I think we learned tonight that there's stuff that we just don't know, whether it's in Jajong Healy, what kind of growth is anticipated in those numbers. Those numbers, while they're a good projection, are the basis for extrapolations of what's going to happen if you change the enrollment zone. And that is going to lead to very real, fixed, durable, persistent investment in choices you're going to have to make. Okay? So understanding that to mitigate the uncertainty, I think is going to be very important. Is something that you're going to do. So what is in that baseline? What is this BC adjustment number? Right? So this 15 growing to 60 and then extrapolate up to 70 kids by the end of the time period. That's 2.5 classrooms shifted over to Lower Merion. That's new. I'd like to know more about that. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Ruth?
Ruth Jenkin, Wynwood, PA. Couple of things. Number one, I just would like to congratulate both schools, Harriton and Lower Merion, on the organic chemistry program that's taking place on Saturdays here at Lower Merion, with 40 students from each high school taking an advanced program. And also, I don't know if you're aware that there are 38 students in the 8th grade BC Spanish class. Unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. I don't know how that happened, but one class is 38, one class is 33. As far as the zoning of the walkable people, which was a districting decision that was made several years ago, of which most of us were opposed, that the walk students should always be allowed to walk. It was one of the qualities that we wanted for our Lower Merion and Harriton students, that they should be able to walk to their schools. As far as expanding the walk zone, I think that's only creating this dilemma that we have, where now we're overpopulating one school and stabilizing another school. What happens when this building is full? Where do we go then? We were guaranteed, to some degree, 2 equal high schools. They created the equal high school at Harriton by taking away the walk zone. Now we're putting the walk zone back, but we're also opening it up to more choice rather than keeping the original districting. So I'd like the board to reconsider that. Also, putting 9th graders in this building, I think at some point is going to cause much confusion for them as they transition from 8th grade into this high school. If this building becomes classrooms, I think seniors should go in here, where they are already stable and understand the process, the school process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we adjourn, I know that Dr. Golden has a quick announcement.
Thank you. I asked President Gilbert, Dr. Gilbert too, and my other board colleagues if it would be okay if I just made an announcement this evening about an upcoming event in our school community. This Saturday, Kinwood Elementary School will host the first annual Calliope Joy Cupcake Challenge. The event is being held to raise awareness about child neurological illnesses and to celebrate the sibling, the younger sibling of two of our current students, a sibling who will never be able to attend Lower Merion schools. There'll be a cupcake baking contest judged by Kinwood principal Dr. Martino and some other celebrity judges, and lots of cupcakes to eat donated by some of the area's top bakeries. So I hope you'll join myself and the Cafalas Carr family and the friends and supporters of the Calliope Joy Foundation at Kinwood Elementary School this Saturday, September 21st. The fun starts at 10 a.m. and will take place rain or shine. Thank you and hope to see you there.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to thank everyone, and with that, we are adjourned.